So, beautiful souls, if you want to optimize your health with the magic of peptides, I'm proud to introduce you to limitlesslivingmd.com. Limitlesslivingmd.com to literally optimize your health, and your health is your greatest wealth. So peptides go into the body and they send signals to the body to optimize for certain desired conditions. So if you're looking for weight loss, if you're looking for anti-aging and longevity, if you're looking for energy, if you're looking for improved cognition, peptides may be the answer for you to help you live your best, most optimized life. So check out limitlesslivingmd.com. My recommendation is to set up a peptide provider consult. Our expert coach will literally listen to you. He'll give you the right dose. And literally the peptide is pure from the pharmacy, not research, from the pharmacy. Right after you have your peptide consult, they'll know exactly what dose. And the problem with a lot of peptides right now is people are getting the wrong dose. If you get the right dose and you start low, we're seeing results where people are literally curing their diabetes, they're losing weight, they're getting their energy, they're having improved cognition, but most of all, they're having improved self-esteem. So I recommend trying the peptide consult if you're not sure, and they'll literally send you the right product, the right dose, and I'm on it, and it's been helping me. So check out www.limitlesslivingmd.com. We're going to continuously add to our product list products that we believe in, that are safe, that can help optimize our best life. What's up, beautiful souls? Welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Psychiatrist podcast. And today we have the special privilege of communicating with a legend in the field of psychiatry, my perspective. When that shit wasn't popular, she was lifting her voice, telling people the truth about psychiatric medications. She was pioneering online programs. She was being very vocal. And I think it's partly because of her voice, the book that she wrote, not to mention only in the field of psychiatry, but also for the field of lifting the divine, feminine, true, powerful essence of the feminine voice that had been suppressed for who knows, 26,500 year cycle, right? And then she's evolving. That's why I'm excited to dive in, because she went from there to then next thing I know, she's pole dancing and posting on Instagram. And I totally get it, right? Because the next wave is full embodiment of our sensuality, which has been, repressed, shamanic, sensual, powerful, the most powerful creative force on the planet, right? Which, she's been expressing authentically on her Instagram without a fucks given who likes it or who doesn't. So, I'm really excited to dive in. Welcome to the episode, Kelly, Dr. Kelly Brogan.
Love that introduction. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, pleasure to have you. Doctor, I tend to believe that every single step someone takes in their heroic path has been somehow preparing them for some type of next step of evolution, for some type of greater purpose, using your creative gifts to give back to humanity in some fun way. Can you walk us through just the key points of how Dr. Kelly Brogan became Dr. Kelly Brogan? What were the key points and highlights that stand out to you that have kind of brought you to where you're at now?
Thank you for this question. I think it's probably a relevant place to start that I was raised by, I'm second generation, my mom's Italian, and I was raised by parents who were very focused on, supporting me in getting a leg up, right? So it was this sort of materialistic, competitive perspective on the world, which I think most people, in their generation came to believe or be indoctrinated in and through and by. And I was in many ways programmed by feminist beliefs. My mom was a homemaker and a stay-at-home quote unquote mom. And she really jumped on the bandwagon, as did so many moms in her generation, and said, you are going to be independent and self-sufficient. You are as smart as any boy. You're going to do math and science and forget about, any other option. So I had this sort of second generation phenomenology where, you got to become a doctor or a lawyer to prove that it was worth it to leave the motherland. And then also this feminist ideology. And My parents really came from poverty. They came from a lot of those kinds of struggles, quote unquote. Although, when they talk about their childhoods, there's like this glimmer of delight and joy and like these hilarious stories and like these wild experiences that they had that really were sanitized like as we began through their very wise choices, as we began to like ascend into the middle class kind of a thing. So anyway, I became a psychiatrist because I think on a deeper level I had never been supported in a relationship to my feelings. Right? It was not modeled for me. It was not encouraged. It was like really not a thing. My mental capacity was really the focus. And so I became a psychiatrist because I couldn't deal with feelings. I literally couldn't deal with them in my own vessel, let alone somebody else's. So, if you think about the problems that people have, they really reduce down to unwanted feeling states. I mean, that's
Mm.
what makes something a problem, right? So
Yeah.
if I could control my own dilemmas and I could control other people's dilemmas, it would be because I could make feelings go away quickly. So I worked a
Mm.
suicide hotline in college. I
Mhm.
went to MIT and there was a suicide hotline. And I quickly learned that psychiatrists were
Yeah.
available on staff at the mental health center to
Mhm.
help people who were having feelings, right? To help people who had
Yeah.
unwanted experiences in their human vessel. And my job was essentially to, like, in crisis, connect people to those psychiatrists. So, of course, I figured by extension, well, I want to be the top dog, right? Like I want to be the one who knows
Mm.
the answers and knows how
Mm.
to, of course, this wasn't conscious, but I was like inspired by the psychiatrists who
Mm.
worked at the mental health center. But I really found a way to continue not feeling and actually develop mastery in that domain. And if you think about, right, like
Mhm.
psychiatry, right, like we have such a regimented and regulated experience professionally of the human dyad, of human interactions, right? Like I'm sure you were trained
Mhm.
to start on time, end on time,
Yeah.
for it to be very clear what the roles were, to be very aware. I mean, I was trained in a more psychoanalytically oriented, like, of course, psychopharmacologically oriented, sort of lineage in Manhattan. And we were trained never to take a gift from a patient, like never
Mhm.
ever to talk about your personal life. I remember I used to
Yeah,
shop
yeah, yeah.
because, of course, I was like,
Yeah.
had no money, and I used to shop at Forever 21, that like chain
Yeah, me
store.
too. Yeah, 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 for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this was like,
Yeah, yeah.
well into my late 20s. And I used to be so afraid every time that a patient of mine would
Mhm.
see me shopping at Forever 21 because it would somehow
Yeah.
disturb this illusion of professionalism that I was like attempting to create as like a med
Mm,
student and a
mm,
resident.
mm,
So, I came into this professional world where I was able to have human interactions that were on my terms and very well regulated. And I
mm,
felt, like everything unwanted had a solution, right? So, this magic pill
mhm,
concept, and it all really made sense, and
mm,
I was like pedigreed with Ivy League training. And there I was, like poised to begin the rest of my life. I had been recently married. Then I became pregnant very intentionally. And I was like starting my postcard life.
mhm,
And of
mhm,
course, that's typically when you are
mhm,
invited to,
mhm,
go a layer deeper. And I was confronted on basically all sides when it came to my body.
mhm,
I was diagnosed with a condition. I'd never even thought about
mm,
what it was like to be a patient. I was
mhm,
diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis on a routine
mm,
physical. And I was able to confront this dissonance that was already living there because I
mhm,
specialized in prescribing to pregnant and breastfeeding women. And I
mhm,
already had this feeling like I would never take these meds as a pregnant
mm,
woman, even though I'm literally
mm.
writing that prescription every day.
Yeah.
And so I confronted that dissonance again when I was diagnosed, and I thought, I'm not taking Synthroid for the rest of my life. Like, no,
Mhm,
no, I'm not doing that. It's fine for my patients, but actually, I knew it
mhm,
wasn't fine for them because I knew that once they were diagnosed with this kind of a thyroid imbalance, they never really felt totally well again. So
mm,
I had many reasons not to want to go down that path. But simultaneously, in my personal life, I was also entering into what could be considered a pretty major crisis because I fell in love outside of my marriage.
mm.
and I was very happily married. So this was extremely confusing.
Mm.
And this was the cauldron within which
Mm.
I developed intimacy with the dark night of the soul, right? I developed a
Mm.
familiarity which would come to me in cycles over the following decade
Mhm.
with the architecture of all of it falling apart and everything that
Mm.
you worked so hard to build, right?
Mm.
This house of cards just blowing away. And what happens in the aftermath, I actually was aware of because I had begun to watch my patients come off of these medications. Once I resolved my Hashimoto's through
Mhm.
lifestyle change, I dedicated my practice to helping women come off of meds. And so I would see this same architecture again and again of massive dissolution of identity, total nihilistic oblivion, right? Like of who they thought they
Mhm.
were. And then I would watch them, usually over the course of about 2 to 3 months, I would watch them like
Yeah.
rise, like literally a phoenix from the ash. So I
Wow.
knew that if you could move through the confusion, you could sit with the unknowing and uncertainty, that something new will crystallize. And so,
Mm.
I think it's a Rumi quote about the wound being where the light enters. If you think
Mm.
about
Mhm.
so many of the particular wounds that I experienced as a little girl, which were in many ways very relatable, I think, to a lot of other girls,
Mm.
they set me up perfectly to develop the defensive structure. You could even describe it as a masculine, a yang defensive structure that had to be dismantled in order to reveal this softer, more vulnerable feminine core and my soul's
Mm.
animation. It was beneath those shells. It still it can be found beneath my shells, which of course are still available to me. And the process of getting to know myself, in my case, started with
Mm.
my body and the basics of self-care of my body, and then moved on to my relationships. And then I guess is still in the process of
Mm.
integrating, these higher dimensions of my energetic self and my spirit. So I've had a pretty typical,
Yeah.
arc, I would say, in
Yeah.
terms of the ruptures and
Mhm.
the expansion into new definitions of self and new relationships to fears that would have formerly totally
Mm.
annihilated me. I like to say now that, expansion is always preceded by the loss of something that you imagine you can't live without. And I've had that kind of loss literally in the form of
Mm.
loved ones and relationships and identities over and over and over again, to know that when I'm
Yeah.
confronted with a bad thing that's
Yeah.
unwanted now, I have a totally,
Mhm.
totally different comportment toward it that allows my nervous
Tell me
system
about
to
that, Kelly. Tell me about
say,
that, because this is deep. Yeah, because it comes full circle. Because you, there's so many tangents there, but the first thing you said was almost every single thing can be related to fear of an unwanted emotion.
mhm,
And then for a lot of us, especially in psychiatry and mental health, because of that, whether it's conscious or unconscious, we get rid of the emotional part and we go straight to the mental, D3, mental
right,
body, and we try to control everything from the mental body. And by the time you're 35, 95% of everything we do is subconscious programming from
yeah,
that little child who learned from mom, or that little boy who learned from dad. Like, yo, you got to go get it. You got to be like, whatever. And that drives us until we come into this relationship with fear.
yeah,
Oh shit, the thing that I fear most of losing. And it sounds like on your hero's journey, you purposefully allowed yourself to come into those relationships of the thing you fear the most. And then now, what is your take? Because if you can explain this, it's like almost like the whole meaning of psychiatry, of that unwanted fear. If
mm,
we can develop that healthy relationship, then we're confronting it, and in the cave we fear is the treasure we seek. So
mm.
how has that evolved, and what's your relationship when you find something you're like, oh shit, like here's a wound and the light's going to enter and I have to develop a relationship with it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's a summary of what I say to myself. I have come to the conclusion at this point anyway, that what I consider to be the signature of like health, let's say, is just getting on your own team, right? So I've become really interested in the triangulation of victim consciousness, right? So, how through this field of consciousness, which is predicated on this tripartite energetic dynamic where you have the identified victim, you have the savior, rescuer, and then you have the villain. And those three positions all hold the same experience of no fair, blaming, right? Somebody did this to me, it's somebody else's fault. And there is a punishment to be exacted, right? There's some sort of correction that needs to happen, and it involves something outside of myself. So the disempowerment that is held in this triangulation is what defines our experience of our humanity in so many ways early in life. And you could even argue that, the two parents and the child are the original triangle, because so many of the, if you want to even invoke Freudian dynamics, so many of the experiences that we have of our same-sex parent and our opposite-sex parent inform how we then go on to relate to our own bodies. Let's say, as women, I learned that from my mom, and the men that I marry are probably going to, in many ways, look a lot like my dad, right? So these dynamics are set up very early in life. They can really invoke a zero-sum game, right? Like a warfare kind of energetic dynamic where it's like somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose. And the maturation into, even in my conventional training, and I'm sure in yours, like we learned about the mixed object, right? We learned about the psychology of an adult that can hold, the tension of opposites, as Jung would describe it, that can hold the good and the bad at the same time, this complexity of awareness that a child doesn't necessarily possess. But at some point, you're supposed to mature into that more removed, that more zoomed out perspective on what's up. But I would argue that our nervous systems, our stress physiology keeps us arrested in a state that actually literally neurophysiologically doesn't allow us that zoomed out perspective. So when I think about, what is the goal of literally any experience that I have of myself in any moment in time, it's going to be like, how can I stay with myself? How can I not self-betray, self-abandon, self-reject? How can I finally, you could call it reparenting, you could call it whatever you want, but how can I finally
Yeah.
just get my own back? And I think a lot of pop psychology, especially talking about like narcissists and toxic relationships or whatever, you would think that getting your back is proving your point and defending yourself. But that's actually just another way that you abandon the post of your own self. You go out and meddle with somebody else's perspective, which is none of your business. And you leave this very important guardianship role that you have for yourself. So when it comes to health and experiences of, anything from gastrointestinal issues to insomnia or so-called anxiety or depression or whatever, there is, through the allopathic system, through the conventional system, always going to be a triangulation against the self that is required if you're going to recruit this system, right? So let's say, I don't know what's up. I haven't slept through the night in like a month, and I'm
Yeah.
really losing it, right?
Yeah.
And I try to take a little herbal supplement I got from the vitamin shop, and I watch a few TikToks on like what I can do
Yeah.
to like, breathe differently, whatever. Nothing's
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
I am going to probably at that point go to my primary care doctor or my psychiatrist if I have one already. And I'm going
Yeah.
to say, I have insomnia. This is absolutely terrible. Can you help me? So what's happening in that moment is that I am committed to my victim role that says, this is bad. I don't like
Yeah.
this. I am rejecting this reality. This is a no. And I'm recruiting the savior in the form of the clinician. Okay. The thing is that that savior, that rescuer is going to support me, is going to come on my team. But here's the issue. The villain that we're both fighting is me. It's just a fragmented off
Yeah.
part of
Word.
me,
Yeah.
dimension of me. So there's no winning that war. And that's why I had a practice full of people who were
Yeah.
ultimately dissatisfied at best, or, really, you could even say violated at worst by a model
Mm-hmm.
that pits you against yourself, right? Through
Mm.
medications, through treatments, through whatever. And the alternative, if there is an alternative, or the maturation of
Yeah.
that, when it's right for you to consider this possibility, you'll have that insomnia, right, experience,
Mm-hmm.
and you will commit to saying, you know what? It's not a problem. It's not a problem. It's happening,
Mm.
and I am a yes to what is happening. Period. Period. And
Wow.
that will inform your entire system, so that your
Mm.
entire system is not in that alarm state. And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean that you are accepting that it never, ever, ever is going to resolve ever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean anything about what's going to happen. It
Mm-hmm.
just means that in the moment where you could depart from yourself and triangulate against yourself, you're going to say, no, I'm
Mm.
here. I'm staying here unconditionally, no matter, I'm going down with this ship. Okay. And of
Yeah.
course, like the beautiful paradox is that you, through doing that, you have access
Mm-hmm.
to new paths, right? To curiosity, to
Mm-hmm.
inspiration, to your own intuition, to an experience of even playfulness with what's happening, that
Yeah. Yeah.
none of that is available to you when you are in rejection of what's going on with you. Now, this is mastery level, because we are
Yeah.
so indoctrinated, brainwashed, and programmed from early on, from our childhoods, around the fact that the body makes mistakes, that it's full of all these inborn errors, that we don't really know how to control it, that we need the help of specialists who
Mm-hmm.
know better. And it's subtle stuff like raising your hand to go pee when you're in first grade, right? Like, this is
Yeah.
not really your domain, this body. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of that programming is defied when you say, actually, this body is me, and I'm with it. I'm here with it
Mm.
unconditionally, no matter what. And
Yeah.
we're going to see what happens if I just love it a little differently, if I just respond a little differently. I try to learn the dialect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, actually, my number one like health tip I'll drop here
Yeah.
is to always write down the first date that you notice a
Yeah.
symptom surfacing. And it doesn't matter what the symptom is.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
oh, you like brushed your hair and you noticed there were like a few extra threads in your
Mm-hmm.
brush, right? Or your digestion was just like a little off, and then it was the next day and the next day. So if you can write down the date of when
Mm-hmm.
something emerges, and that something, let's say, begins to take on a life of its own, and it
Mm-hmm.
lasts weeks or months or whatever, retrospectively analyzing that is notoriously challenging. But if you
Mm-hmm.
just note the date, you can start to unravel the way that your body talks to you through symptoms, because you'll be able to
Mm-hmm.
track back and say, oh, you know what? I had that huge argument with my son the night before, or
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks
Yeah.
prior, I got into that car accident, or, I had that really intense nightmare a month before, and then
Mm-hmm.
whatever. You'll start to understand the message, that your symptoms
Yeah.
are there to communicate. And there doesn't mean there's anything to do. It just means that you start to develop intimacy. It's like a healthy
Mm.
relationship versus a toxic codependent relationship. You start to develop intimacy and this kind of open communication with your own body that allows
Mm.
you to enjoy a more secure attachment.
Yeah. Cool. I like that. So I want to dive back into this. So don't abandon yourself, because the moment that we recruit a savior, we already triangulate, and the problem, the victim, and this is really the cure to victim consciousness and taking back your power. Because as long as I'm pointing my finger and the solution, the victim, the savior is outside of me, and nobody's coming to save us. Right? And so then it triangulates the energy flow outside of me and puts my power outside of me. And that is, I'm powerless then to some energy outside of
Yep.
me. And this is where I think you're explaining parts work in a different way.
Mhm.
So there's parts of me that somewhere along the line where my body was in a situation where I felt I couldn't sleep. or I felt I was under threat, where I literally perhaps abandoned a part of me, traumatized. In the spiritual world, they say like soul fragmentation
Yes.
in that time, which is outside of me. And by developing an intimacy and understanding where it happened, observing it, developing intimacy with it, and eventually fiercely loving it and loving it in a different way, I think you said. Love is the cohesive power of the universe, which literally then can like start developing a relationship to bring these fragmented parts of me, power, my soul, back into my essence. And then my body and my cells get the message, like this underlying thing I think you're saying is, I will not abandon you. I will stay with you through the discomfort. If we sing together, we ride together, you know what I mean? And that is, if I'm hearing you correctly. And I know that this is where you've been kind of like, I think I see that in display in the way you're living. But I want to jump into, before we get to re-embodiment, and I know you have like a reclamation project, a podcast. So I think that we can dive into that. That's where you're at right now. But like, you put out like a vital mind reset. Can you tell us a little bit about vital mind reset and why at that time you put that out and what that was for the target audience, like what it does for people?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, when you talk about this arc that I have walked, which I think it's just been almost like more cartoonish than most. That's really the only difference between like me and, my neighbor. I look back at this program that I developed with the help of some really extraordinary curriculum designers, and it was like a dream. It was like literally like a dream state that had happened. And so it's like, what was one of the first experiences and examples that I had of like something just like coming through, and I actually almost never talk about this, but when I reflect back on it, it's really quite surreal, and probably the best first example that I ever had of like, this was all destiny, right? Like this was all meant to happen, because the program honestly it's quite basic lifestyle medicine, right? So it's a 44-day program. It's what I did to resolve my Hashimoto's, and it's a very specific diet, which is not even that complicated. It's like an ancestral kind of diet. It's 3 minutes of contemplative practice. I'm trained in Kundalini yoga and medical meditation. So it's, specific ones related to that, 3 minutes a day. And then it is conscious consumerism, so like, what products do I buy if I actually am interested in sending different signals to my body? And then detox, right? The detox I learned from my mentor, who also came on the scene at just the right time that I was developing this program. My mentor's name was Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez. And in my opinion, he was one of the most important figures in modern medicine. He's most known for his cancer outcomes, but he worked with nutritional protocols to put degenerative illnesses and terminal cancers into long-term remission. And I was one of the only MDs he ever mentored. And I had a very deep spiritual relationship with him in the last year of his life, where I feel like something was transmitted to me through him. And if I could describe it, which is very difficult to do in words, I would say it was a radical faith in the human body.
Wow.
And, because of his outcomes, because he was so academic and had this very like erudite way of being, I was convinced beyond, I can never unsee, what I saw in his office in that year, which was that you can heal anything, literally anything. And that, he often talked to me about faith as being, he would say, fear is contagious, but faith has to arise, organically. And so I learned about the role of this fierce belief in yourself, right? Like in your body, in the wisdom of your biology, and not like until it's inconvenient, right? Like literally no matter what. Like that's just your default worldview. And so, he reviewed and helped to develop the program, and specifically the detox arm of my program. And then I went on to implement this in my practice with women who were coming to me for psychiatric reasons, who were coming because they wanted to
Mm-hmm.
come off of meds, 5 meds they'd been on for 30
Yeah.
years, or because they wanted to get pregnant and they wanted to discontinue their antidepressant, or because they just weren't happy with the, 3 meds they'd been taking since a college breakup. And now they're, 40. And I used this program primarily to stabilize their systems, I call it send a signal of safety, before we would taper meds. And only when I did that, because I had a little bit of experience doing it the other way, where I would taper
Yeah.
meds regardless of, what they were eating or whatever, it was an absolute nightmare. I was literally running like an outpatient rehab with no staff, basically, when I was trying that. And then when I transitioned to foregrounding this protocol, I started to get extraordinary outcomes, not just in psychiatry. I would have, a woman with a 18-year lupus diagnosis in remission, according to her own doctor, in 5 weeks. I would have inflammatory bowel disease and asthma. I didn't know nothing about these things, right? Like, this was not my specialty. I mean, not nothing, but you know what I mean? It wasn't like my practice, and medicine is so niche that I really was very focused on, what it was that I was trained to do. And so I started to publish these outcomes, and I actually partnered with this guy, Rob Abbott, and we put together an IRB approved randomized trial of the protocol.
Yeah.
And so we
Yeah.
published a case series. I published
Mhm.
many, many case reports, one of which a Graves' disease report that was, there's never been one prior in the medical literature. It's just crazy, of no radiation, no pharma, resolution of this diagnosis. And so the field of possibility and potentiality started to grow and grow and grow related to this protocol. And so now this protocol is something that I mostly use with, high-powered female entrepreneurs because, it happens to
Yeah.
be the case in that population. Ask me how I know, in that population, that they need to settle and ground their nervous systems again to get out of these habits of overwhelm, frustration, disappointment, feeling, this brain fog, feeling this wired, tired experience of tapping their, reserves for sometimes years on end, so that they can expand more into receiving, right? Into experiencing their womanhood in a way that they know they came here to. So it really has sort of spanned the gamut, rather, of, supporting people who were about to go to state hospital with a history of electroconvulsive treatment on multiple medications, multiple
Wow.
suicide attempts,
Yeah.
all the way to, some of my most esteemed colleagues who come to me because they are just feeling burned out, and I call it overachieving, under receiving. And so it just happens to be one of the well-documented, I think, ways to establish a nervous system reset, right? To establish that that exhale for the system that allows the body to reharmonize and then direct its own next step, right? Because I certainly don't imagine that I am in a position to have any idea what people are supposed to do to, develop more and more of a relationship with their essential oils, homeopathy,
Yeah.
crystals, shamanism, plant medicine. I don't know. You've got to figure it out. But how do you even listen to that voice when you have, brain fog and constipation and joint pain and your hair is falling out? You've got to quiet everything down, right? So you can hear yourself and feel what I call your little yes and your little no. Like it's like a self-led kinesiology in a way.
Yeah.
And so it's really served that purpose. And now it's been around my program for many years, so that we have even more data and information. And it's arguably, like what I came here to offer.
And I love that. There's so much there, because it's like it was channeled, right? And like it's like the first time in your life where you felt like it was being given to you. And I just want to put that out there, that people you have a dharma, and you're not alone. And whatever you want to call it, your soul, your oversoul, your avatar Christo self, your spirit guides, they're with you. And that's the thing in psychiatry. I feel like isolation, illness, the moment that the body, and this is why I actually really appreciate your message, don't abandon the body. because a cancer cell is a cell that has received the information from the mental body that it's alone. And when you replace the I in illness with we, illness becomes wellness, and it's about interconnection, and every cell starts communicating again. And this universal protocol that was given to you, whether you want to call it by your higher self, such a pivotal time in psychiatry to reset the nervous system, not only of the individual, but of the female entrepreneur, to help people reset, to taper them off of psych meds. It's universal: nutrition, detox, movement, breath, and this particular 40-day protocol. And then also, I love what you said, but when that happens, we can listen to what is that still quiet voice, which has access to information beyond space or time, which only has your highest evolutionary potential in mind, your superconscious mind, Freud called it. Quantum morphogenetic physics calls it your fourth, fifth, and sixth stranded DNA. And it has information. And if you follow that, even if it tells you quit your psychiatry job 2 weeks before you're about to become a partner at Kaiser Permanente in LA with 300,000 of medical school loans, and you have no fucking idea what you're going to do. It's that voice though. It's not my mind. And then I don't know what you want to call it, soul, higher self, it only has your highest level, and then you follow it, and then you create the program. And then, and then this beautiful kind of, I guess, unfolding starts happening once we feel safe enough in our body, and the body gets the message: yo, I'm not abandoning you. I'm actually going to give you the right nutrition, and I'm going to detox all the shit out. And I'm with you. Even if we sink, float, quit, whatever, we going together. And I think that's the beautiful kind of stage that humanity is coming into, is this stage of embodiment. So that program sounds kick-ass. And then how did you transition there, Kel, from there to, I mean, because when I first saw you doing, dancing around the pole, I was like, oh shit, okay, what's Kel's up to? You know what I mean? No, but I commend you for it, because that's what I'm trying to do too right now. I think you're a few steps ahead of me in that area. But, I was brought up in a super religious family, and my body, I was taught that to shake my hips was a sin, and this kind of this programming that was really religiously deep, a program, and I've been shaking that and moving that, and I'm actually going to International School of Temple Arts to dive into it, to no, this energy is powerful, it's creative, it's my birthright, and I've abandoned parts of my soul in the past that was related to this powerful energy. And if I'm not going to use it to create a baby, I can use it to create beauty. I can use it to create a company. I can use it to create new universes and new galaxies. It's the same energy that Source used to create galaxies, and it's pleasurable. And there's a reason why God created the clit, and the only reason for the clit is to receive pleasure. Yeah, that's the only function of the clit from my awareness. And then so when I saw you, I subtly realized, oh, Kel's reclaiming her sensuality and not giving a fuck what other people think. So tell me about that journey, because that's bold too, to share that, journey with other people. And, because there's been so much, that has happened over the last 26,000 years to suppress that energy. And so how has that been coming through for you? How's that journey been like? And any kind of key points that you want to share with us today about that?
Thank you. You're so funny. Literally the only people in my entire life who call me Kel is my family.
Oh, for real?
The only people, and you.
Yeah.
No, it's too funny. Yeah. I love it. So I had a cardinal experience. So, I spent years as an anti-pharmaceutical activist. I, made that program, wrote a bunch of books. I got married again to the man that I had fallen in love with, and went on an extraordinary magical carpet ride of a life experience, very expanded, explored so much of the new age that I, as a secular atheist myself, in those earlier decades had probably rolled my eyes at. So I was at this place where I thought I knew what spirituality was, right? I knew about ecstatic dance, and I knew about meditation, and I knew about plant medicine, and I knew about, all these powerful ways that you could be a better spiritualist, right? Like you could get
Mm.
better at being spiritual. And
Mm.
I think I was in the notorious like flight from self that a lot of spiritual folks,
Mm.
quote unquote, and New Agers get sort of arrested in, which is, they feel a lot of shame, right? Most of us, I'll say we feel shame. Okay. This is
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
society is literally controlled, is through that one emotional signature.
Mm.
So you feel shame, and there are all these practices and communities that promise you
Mm-hmm.
an escape from that bad feeling, right? And
Mm.
so you can learn these practices to transcend your
Mm.
experience, right? and
Mm.
and and when you have a transcendent experience, it's usually because you've left this vessel, right? You've left this
Yeah.
place that's full of all these unwanted feelings. So we're sort
Mm.
of like back to that refrain. And I wasn't really aware, I don't think, that
Mm.
I had so much of my life force still locked up in body
Mm.
and sexual shame. I had like a very expanded erotic life. I've always been
Mm.
I've always loved to dance, so I felt like,
Mm.
oh yeah, I'm comfortable with
Yeah.
this. And I really didn't meet these dimensions of myself until I left my second marriage. And when I did that in 2021, it was probably the hardest decision I've ever made for a million reasons. And I had been like in the fetal position crying for what
Mm.
was probably like literally 3 weeks. And one day I'm just like laying on the
Mm.
couch, like snot running down my face, feeling extraordinarily victimized by my own choice. And I just had a little bit of awareness that there was something other than just bad in how I
Mm.
was feeling in that moment. And that little bit of awareness allowed me to
Mm.
experience the aliveness of this grief while I was also experiencing the pain of the grief. And I had this impulse
Mm.
to get up and move, right? So, like, the millions of times that I probably put on a song to like dance a feeling or whatever were probably
Mm.
coming from a place of like, oh, this is what a spiritual person does in this moment, right? She puts
Mm.
on a
Mm.
sad song because she's feeling sad. And that
Yeah.
moment, it was completely spontaneous. And I put on music and I started to move, but it was like down tempo. It was like sensual, let's say, music.
Yeah.
And I started to like just sort of like dance for myself, but in this like more, like I was like running my
Mm-hmm.
hands over my body, and it was like a more like sensual movement than I
Yeah.
probably had ever really done for my own benefit.
Mm.
Long story short, I had this little impulse to
Mm.
record myself, fully clothed, all the things, um, doing this, like dancing in this way.
Yeah.
And to start to talk about relating to the creative impulse that comes out of the
Mm.
unwanted feeling state, right? That alchemy,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to call it that, that transmutation from
Yeah.
the bad feelings to the creative energy reclamation. I wanted to start to talk about that because I had
Mm.
experienced it in just this simple little way. And that
Mm-hmm.
began this couple months, I would say like 6-month experience that I had of following these impulses, which also led me, as you referenced, to a
Mm-hmm.
pole dance class and
Yeah.
beginning to share that journey. I mean, when I
Mm.
first took a pole dance class, I had never worn shorts in my life,
Wow.
ever. And
Damn.
I just, like a lot of women, there's like a part of our body where we carry a lot of shame and
Mm.
maybe, even specific experiences of regrettable aspects of our sexuality or whatever. And for me, it was like so much in my legs, right? So like
Mm.
you would never have seen me in shorts. Okay, so you
Mm.
cannot actually pole dance
Mm-hmm.
in pants. You literally can't. Like, you need the contact with the
Yeah.
pole of your skin to
Mm-hmm.
even do a beginner class. So
Yeah.
I worked with that experience of shame, and I used to go to class in leg warmers, and then I would
Yeah.
take the leg warmers off just for like 10 minutes, and then I put them back
Mm-hmm.
on. And marinating in this culture of radical celebration and embrace by other women
Mm.
who were like very scantily clad.
Mm.
Okay. So like that, most of the women in the class are like in a G-string of some variety and like a bikini top.
Mm.
And anytime, the first time I got like a climb, everyone in the room like clapped for me. I mean, I could
Yeah.
cry talking about it now. It was so
Wow.
healing for me on a level
Mm.
that no amount of these masculine lineage practices, consciousness oriented practices like meditation, et cetera, could ever have provided me, right? To come into greater embrace, acceptance, and alchemy of that shame
Mm.
with other women was what I needed. And of course, the shadow of that was to experience my own self-judgment
Mm.
through my haters, right? So like the deluge of
Yeah.
rejection and criticism and threats that I received from people who were
Damn.
understandably used to me getting up there talking about,
Mm.
vaccine this, pharma this, gluten
Yeah.
this, whatever, and psychoneuroimmunology. And here I am,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, twerking on a pole or whatever the hell I was doing. I get it. And not only do I
Sure,
get
sure.
it, but the voices that hurt me the most. So you joked in the beginning that I give zero fucks. It's actually not the case at all. Like I gave tremendous amounts of more fucks about this than any other criticism. I've got death threats with aerial shots of my home in the past over my
Damn.
scientific perspectives. That was no thing. Like this, however, had me on my knees. And
Wow.
that's when I developed the practice I call, entering through the upset, which is basically I decided to start to do something with these experiences of criticism and pushback and to just stay with myself as I felt the shame, the embarrassment, as I heard those voices that
Wow.
said, what have you done? You've
Wow.
destroyed your career. You're such an asshole. Like, nice work, Kelly. Like, is this who you are without a man in your life? Like, you have no idea how to be a woman. Like, you're humiliating yourself. And I would, what I call, wear the villain crown. So I would take a comment that said, not only are you a horrible dancer, but you're a narcissist and you are recklessly harming everyone that you say you're here to help. Okay, for example. And I would take that comment and I would just, in the quiet and privacy, after being with the sensations that it brought up, I would just try on the possibility that it's true. Right.
Wow.
And I would just see, because obviously there's a part of me that agrees with that, or it wouldn't bother me. That's the nature of sensation-based dynamics. It's like this erotic energy, as you referenced, that's in my body is summoned. I feel literally aroused in my system. My heart's racing, my skin is flushed because there is a part of me that this other person is holding for me. Okay, that wants to come home. And it's the part that says, you are doing it wrong as a woman. My part believes that, or it wouldn't feel activated by this other person saying it. So this reclamation of my erotic energy, which I think of as you do, as life force energy, to me has started to make a lot more sense as I've, begun to explore even the Toltec lineages and others that talk about how we come from sex. We literally come from sex. And, I have one of my teachers, Joel Schaefer, he talks about how Castaneda would teach that the imprint of the sex that your parents had to conceive you is what imprints your sexuality for your life. So if it was like, what he calls a bored fuck versus if it was a violation versus if it was like this, pleasurable experience or whatever, like that will inform so many aspects of how you experience your own sexuality, which will inform how you experience this animation of your own body and, as you mentioned, your creative energy. So, I myself have been celibate for several years and I have encountered dimensions of my creative self. I mean, I've learned to sing. I've learned different kinds of dancing. I've learned to sew. I've started gardening. Like my house is decorated completely. Like I have an experience of my feminine gifts, if you will, although I wouldn't say I'm particularly good at any of those things, but I have experiences of my feminine gifts that are clearly a channeling of my sexual energy into, you know, other arenas of expression. And I don't know that that would have been something I could even have understood had I not said, again, I will stay on your team, Kelly. Like I will stay on your team and I will not go out into other people's perspectives to meddle with their reality. That is not my business, and try to prove, defend, or convince them of what it is that is going on over here. It's not necessary. And that to me is the definition, if there were to be a definition of a reclaimed woman, is a woman who no longer feels the compulsion to prove anything, to defend herself, to blame, or to otherwise explain even why she is doing what she's doing. She follows her inner no, she follows her inner yes, and that is her relationship to the directionality of her life choices.
Mic drop. Yo, yeah, fuck. So much. I will stay with myself. I am the hero, villain, and the savior. I will literally take that Instagram comment that was meant to hurt me, and I will reverse the polarity of that comment within my vessel, and I will feel the shame coming back to where we started this conversation. The escape of feeling is the cause, from one perspective, of all mental health condition. But I will stay with that feeling. I will neutralize that feeling with observation and love and feeling it. As Rumi said, these feelings are visitors who come in and out through the body. And you're doing that. And that's really cool. And that's why I said I feel like you're a couple steps ahead of me in that arena, because I'm learning how to do that right now. And it's not fucking easy when that feeling comes through. And every programming and nervous system and everything in society has told you to suppress, repress. And I love how you went into like spiritualize even. Like that's, hey, let me go beat some fucking drums on this feeling. Let me go ecstatic dance this shit away. Let me go cacao, drink some cacao with the sunrise. Let me go, put my feet on the floor and dance like a fucking, hippie, and that's going to save the world, whatever, right? Whatever spiritual new age hippy dippy. And that's a part of the path for sure. But then I love that we come full circle. The spiritual path comes full circle. It's like, no, I'm not trying to be spiritual. I am spiritual when I'm in my fucking body. And I'm not trying to be an ascended master. I'm here to be a descended master. And fully human and fully divine. And that takes courage, I'm finding. And a commitment to stay with the body. And literally, it can be so tricky. The ego can be so tricky to come into victim mode, to try to quell that feeling. And to really commit. And I hope that anybody listening is hearing that there's a commitment to the physical vessel as a temple, as just whatever you want to call it. It's all of it, like a meat suit, a vessel, a water bag. But the feelings travel through that. And that's a part of God too. And I cannot abandon my feelings. And eventually when you do that, I think what Kelly's saying is you come to a point where you reclaim your power. I don't have to prove myself to anyone. And if you want to do shadow work, ask the question, who am I trying to prove myself to? I am that I am. I am source. And what is guilt and shame anyway but a feeling that has been programmed into us to think that we are separate from God? And all compassion to humanity for what we've been through for the last 26,500 years of this programming. But we're coming into this day and age, I feel, where we're reclaiming the authentic expression is the resurrection. And so, Dr. Kelly Brogan, can you tell us just a little bit, what do you see for humanity right now? Where are we at? And what do you see arising from your guides? Where are we going? And how can we prepare for that?
Yeah, I love this. Well, I'll add one thing because, you said that maybe I'm a few steps ahead. I have no idea what this journey looks like for a man. And
Mm,
I
mm,
really do think that these embodiment experiences are meant to be explored women with women
mm,
and men with
mm,
men. That there are dynamics that become available between a man and a woman that
mm.
probably are largely inaccessible if we don't resonate and sort of, co-regulate with same-sex groups,
Interesting.
right? So, when
Mm,
I teach women how to be with their feelings, I
mm,
invoke this phrase that I sort of like tongue in cheek use called self-husbanding, right? So,
mm.
where in a moment where you feel upset, you drop everything and you
Yeah.
feel your spine,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you begin to bring your attention in this like super devoted, super present
Mm,
way that you imagine in your own body like a really good man, a good husband would do for you as a woman, right? Where you feel
mm,
his big energy field in the room and he's
mm.
like, I got you, baby. What do you got for me? Show me.
So
Okay.
I'm imagining
So
like a huge divine mother, like just fucking yumming me. Okay, keep going.
yeah. So maybe there's something like
Yeah,
some,
yeah,
complementary
interesting.
practice, but this is what
Mm-hmm,
like a
mm-hmm.
woman who has I have no idea what a man feels like, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it's a little bit of a play on polarities,
Mm-hmm.
inner polarities,
Yeah.
but it's this experience of invoking the mature version of what has been captured and in many ways arrested in development of my animus, right? Like of my yang dimension. So now
Mm,
I'm going to like work with that in the most elevated form
mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
that I can create a container for my
Cool.
feminine energy. Now, what that looks like for a man, I
Mm-hmm,
literally have no idea.
mm-hmm,
Like what it's like for a man to learn to feel his feelings, but it
mm-hmm,
might have something to do with self-containment, right? With like becoming this uncollapsible, unshakable space for
mm-hmm,
yourself so that nothing actually needs to happen from the
mm,
feminine energetics of the feeling, right? And what happens, the wise action that surfaces is something that arises after the feeling states have informed, right?
mm,
That awareness. I don't know. But my
mm-hmm.
sense is we're in an extraordinarily exciting time,
Yeah.
because I mentioned that I was like a born and bred feminist,
Mm-hmm,
and I've come to the rather recent conclusions that many of the promises of feminism, be that,
mm-hmm,
you know, the inclusion in the workplace, the lack of responsibility for any dimension of my biology, from my menstrual
mm-hmm,
cycle to my experience of pregnancy, postpartum, breastfeeding, et cetera, that I could just like transcend
mm-hmm,
and get beyond my female biology, that I could be totally self-sufficient, that I could be on a even playing field with men sexually, right? All of
mm-hmm,
these promises seem to have left most of us as women pretty disappointed, overwhelmed, feeling isolated, feeling bitter, feeling resentful, right? And
mm-hmm,
so where do we
mm-hmm,
go from here? Well, we have, been through these different stages where so many men are cultivating their feminine, they're being encouraged to feel their feelings, right? And they're learning yoga and they're becoming more free and easy, right? And so many women are
mm-hmm.
becoming
Yeah.
harder and more, rigid. You can even look at our shapes and our forms. We're like tight, right? And so somehow we're in this neutralized place with like, I don't know, 70% divorce rate. And we don't know what it is to come together in trust and commitment and devotion. And yet we have all of the ingredients of this extraordinary opportunity to organize ourselves electively by choice into our essence, into our respective domain, and
Yeah.
see what kind of complementary power, synergy, and magic is available, between men and women. And I'm not, yes, I'm talking sacred sexuality and marriage and union, but I'm also just talking about the very real fact that we walk this
Yeah.
plane together, right? So like I could never touch a
Mm-hmm,
man again and I still walk the plane
mm-hmm,
with men. So coming into some sort of
mm-hmm,
harmony with that dimension of myself, right? The father energy within me is probably going to serve not only me, but my children, a potential partner that I have, and even the collective. And I see this happening. You know, I have teenage daughters, and they just have a completely different awareness around personal responsibility, emotional maturity, you know, the intrinsic value of a woman's caretaking impulse in the home, right? Like they, you know, they have role models who are like 22 years old, having kids and, you know, homemakers. The pendulum is swinging back from wherever it was that I lived in most of my adult life as like, you know, an aspiring girl boss. It's already swinging back in one generation. And it's super exciting to see. I think there's no mistakes. Everything is exactly how it needed to be. And we probably could never have designed it better.
Yeah. So, recap, feeling state, abandoning the feeling state is where it all started. And then going into the mental body, and that's kind of like a mirror of what society has done for the last 26,000 years, into the Western science, into the achievement, into the hyper masculine patriarchy, all that stuff, and then coming back and reclaiming through nutrition, right, which prepares the nervous system to re-embody, detox, breath work, all these things, right? Clearing the vessel in order to come into this state where the astrology and everything is moving us into this state now of a new timeline that's never existed before for humanity. The stars are showing where we get to now take the pieces and parts and self-organize into a new system that we get to choose. It's a brand new timeline. We get to self-organize. We are co-creating a whole new world. Don't you dare close your eyes. But yeah, that's what I feel is the consensus of a lot of people are saying. But like, I love the underlying message is that there's like a decision that is made to stay with the body. And that's a decision and a commitment. And Kelly dropped some clues like, yo, like, imagine, just put your spine straight, the throne of God, and imagine that the most powerful essence of the version of yourself, not powerful is not the right word, but maybe the divine mother, if you're male, and whatever it is protecting you and guiding you. And from that place, feel and have the courage to feel and reclaim the emotional body. And from there, authentic expression is the resurrection. And Kel, it's like, how has that been? Because I think it's been like 2-3 years since, if I remember correctly, when I started seeing those pole dancing on that, like, and now you're staying with yourself, you're teaching entrepreneurs how to do it. How's that journey been? Like, because I just started, so like I went to East and I love what you said, like hang out with in men, right? So there was like a group of men and we were all naked together, jumping up and down, like, and yeah, there was a power in reclamation, because like that was like, something that I wasn't, something that my body was not given permission to do before. And there was a freedom, a next level of freedom. But I know that this process is continuous, because this has been like 26,000 years of past lives on past lives of cellular memory that we're trying to reclaim. So how has that journey been for you since you decided you're going to stay with your body? Anything coming through?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I probably am in now like a quieter phase that I needed to prepare for on a nervous system level for a long time. I think like so many people, it's like, oh yeah, I want peace and harmony and stability, but I couldn't handle that. That's why I would always kick up drama, because I was addicted to the arousal of conflict and struggle and problems to solve, right? So when everything is just a yes, meaning like I'm down with whatever's happening in my life, what's here, what's not here, I am oriented towards my life with a yes comportment, things get real quiet and I stop paying attention. I really put down my activist sword. I stopped engaging in so many of the things that I think were core parts of my identity. And so I entered into this sort of like chrysalis, I would say, over the past maybe year or year and a half. And interestingly, it's led me to really soften a lot of my, pretty much all of my hardcore beliefs. And I would say
Wow.
that, especially as a parent, one of the most resilient of those beliefs was around food, right? So I raised
Hmm.
my daughters pretty much on the diet that I promote in my program, to the extent that they never ate pizza or birthday cake at a birthday party in their lives,
Hmm.
and I was like
Yeah.
constantly providing the like organic, gluten, dairy free,
Hmm.
options. And very recently, after 15 years of very
Hmm.
rigidly adhering to that diet myself, I got an impulse, right? I got an inspiration,
Hmm.
intuition, to see what would happen. I was in Paris actually with my daughters. What would happen if I ate a croissant? and uh, and so it's really opened up this whole new arena for me of understanding the subconscious spiritual dimensions of having boundaries with food as a
Hmm.
very important part of resolving a lot of like mother father issues. And then the imperative to eventually consider softening those boundaries to take back in these energies that you deem as bad. So for me, it'd be like bread and the dairy or whatever. And actually, in family constellation, theory that I study, bread is the father and dairy is the mother, right? So it's
Hmm.
these subconscious representations. So, for me, it was literally 15 years, though. I mean, for somebody else, it might be a year or
Yeah.
2 years or whatever, but trusting those impulses, trusting that little spark of, hey, what about this? Try this. Moving into always experimenting with discomfort. And that's not forcing yourself. It's a very different thing. It's having a little, I call it a little yes, that you listen to, even though it's uncomfortable to listen to it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm in an interesting moment now that is probably more like private in my personal, like lived life experience than it is
Hmm.
in my, sort of like, pole dancing on Instagram kind of an experience. And maybe it'll, like
Yeah.
who
Yeah. For
knows?
sure.
Who knows where it'll
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
from here? But I always know that the inspiration will come from within me. And then when it comes, it's usually pretty startling, right? Like it's usually pretty
Hmm.
disruptive to whatever it is that I have going on. And the more that inspiration comes from within me, the less I experience these like cosmic two by
Hmm.
fours from the outside of,
Yeah.
things pushing me, jostling me, moving me along my process, from sort of happenings in my life, I would say.
Yeah. Love that. So stillness arises and no
Yeah.
need to prove, no need to do. And when the inspiration comes, it comes naturally. And that's really cool for me to hear that. All right, everybody. This Dr. Kelly Brogan, MD, a pioneer in the field of psychiatry. Mad respect. Thank you for paving the way when it wasn't popular, and
Mhm.
now we see the whole movement happening. And so, check out Vital Mind Reset, everybody. 40 days, get your nervous system right. If you're a female entrepreneur out there, Dr. Kells is working with empowering you guys to go live your best life and to reclaim your body. Yeah, and I'm sure new inspiration will flow through. Dr. Kell, how can people follow you, your journey?
Oh, thank you. Um, I'm just at kellybroganmd.com. We have tons of free
Mm.
resources there. Or if you're ready to dive in, I have my signature programs to really move you along the cardinal steps of this initiatory process, and the rest is up to you.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Dr. Kell, thank you so much for your presence on Earth. Thank you for being born. Thank you for pioneering in psychiatry and for being on the podcast. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a joy. What's up, beautiful souls? Proud to announce the launch of www.samuelbleemd.com, a one-stop landing page for everything that I'm offering to the world currently. So that includes the Eternal Life Tribe, where you can find a link to join my online community, where literally, like, we're having breathwork sessions, powerful. We're having bi-weekly Q&A sessions. We're having access to all of the eternal life wisdom and literally the 12-strand DNA activation course, which for me is the quickest way to activate your 12-stranded DNA for the liberation of all sentient beings. Let's go. But most importantly, you're going to get a community, and the community is the magic. I replace the I in illness with we, and illness becomes wellness. Imagine 600-700 plus people. When you ask a question, every single one of them is there to help. Hey, yo, this is what helped me. Absolutely no judgment. And we're doing a lot of exciting things on the community. So if you feel called to join, check out www.samuelbleemd.com. You'll find a link to the Eternal Life Tribe. You'll also find a link to all the podcasts. You'll also find a link to an online store with all of my favorite supplements, all of my favorite products, and all of my favorite machines and technologies. We're also building out a concierge health service. So it doesn't matter what you or your loved one is going through. We have the technology already. So we're putting together specialized protocols for you or your family member if you feel the call to receive treatments that treat the root cause and activate your limitless potential. So check it out, www.samuelbleemd.com.